own them as being legitimate roles. We must be individuals among others, connected, sometimes in a very difficult moment. What I'm trying to tell you, I can best sum up through a story that happened not to me, but to my own son. Now, I got to tell you, we don't do too much religious education of our own children in our own home anymore. They've all grown up. But when they were young, they never came to us saying, Dad, Mom, what's God? What about? They never asked us those questions, partly because they were hearing about them all the time, so that it wasn't, shall we say, an unknown subject. My first advice to you then, parents, is don't wait until your children ask. Start talking about it right away. The second part is that sometimes your kids will tell you they have learned something even without telling you. My son, who is now 25, was once in second grade. We were in the city of Austin, Texas, which, as progressive as it is still in Texas. And I remind you that the commercial they had years ago about tourists, it's like a whole other country. It is a whole other country. I've been there. And he, my second grader, was a member of my church, which was, of course, the Unitarian Church, of which there was one in 4 counties, one amongst 1 million people. So it was a relatively rare phenomenon, let me put it to you that way, not unlike West Michigan, for example. And he discovered that one of his playmates in second grade was forming a club. You know how kids do this on the playground? Those little groups that are meant to take people in and leave people out. And his club, the Friends Club, was for saved Christians. We could do this in Texas, you understand. At least kids talk that way. Now, I've not figured out what an unsaved Christian is, but apparently this was a significant designation. And of course, my son knew he was not in a Christian church, and he knew, at least by that criterion, he was not saved. However, I love this. When someone asked him what he believed, he gave back what we had been teaching. He said, we're Unitarian Universalists, and Universalists think everyone goes to heaven. And suddenly they wanted him to form a club of his own. My story here illustrates that when you own who you are, not what others say you are, the groups to which you belong, not the groups that won't let you in, when you can grab your identity and the groups that make that identity, you find strength. You find your center. And you find people respect you. They will even follow you. Because there's nothing more attractive, more appealing, more powerful in the world than someone who knows who she is, knows whose he is, and can own that. Not forever, but for today. Right now, be fully present in who you are. People like that, I tell you, are those who take part in their lives, not just partake of their lives. You know the difference? Partaking, you go to the restaurant, you take stuff off the table, and you just eat and graze. Too many people graze their way through life. To take part is to cook, serve, eat, and clear the table and do the dishes. Taking part in life is what I'm asking you to do, to be engaged as an individual with the groups, not only to receive but to give, to engage deeply in your own heart and deeply in the lives of others, which I know is hard. It's so much easier to do it alone. It's so much simpler to partake instead of take part. But we live in a world that is frightened by differences, confused by the way that we have divided ourselves up around race and class and religion and language and gender and sexuality. And who can blame them if they want to seek the comforts of their little enclaves, their little clubs, their place of sameness, their place of safety? We understand that. I understand that. But those comforts come at a cost, a terrible, terrible cost. Because we not only do not meet the other parts of the world that are out there. We don't meet the other parts of ourselves that are in there. When we are cut off from the male if we're female, from the gay if we're straight, from the agnostic if we're believing, from the Republican if we're Democrat, if we forget that we're cutting ourselves off from ourselves as well. The comforts of a simple individual identity come at the cost of dividing your souls inwardly. So what I'm trying to tell you here is to observe not just the anniversaries of a Fort Hood or Maine, or even the end of World War I on Tuesday. No, it's Wednesday. I want you also to remember two other great events. First of all, that as of Friday, Sesame Street was 40 years old. 40 years brought to you by the letters A through Z, in which people of all kinds managed to live together. Wouldn't it be cool if we could make our services brought to you by the letters FSC? There is an experiment in inclusion that has worked. Celebrate that identity of inclusion. And the other one, tomorrow, 20 years since the Berlin Wall came down. A monument to hope and inclusion, that the people on the other side of the wall were not enemies because they were communists. They weren't enemies because they were Christians or agnostics. They weren't enemies because they were Dutch or French or African or gay. They were people. And we needed to get to them, even if it meant whacking at the wall until it fell. Oh, God, can you remember that day? We can do this, comrades. That's why we are here, to break down the Berlin walls in our own hearts, in our own families, in our own city, to rejoice that every Sunday you can go to a church and you can hear Greek and Aramaic and Spanish and English and Dutch and German, that you can go out into the streets and find people from Ethiopia and Somalia and from Southeast Asia and from Mexico. Here in this tiny little part of the world that looks so much like a neighborhood on a television screen. The world is right here, and we keep forgetting it because the walls are there. Comrades, we need to break down the walls so we can become inwardly what the world needs to become outwardly. A man who wrote about Lincoln, Edwin Markham, gave me a motto I have tried to live with badly, but I have tried. Edwin Markham wrote, "They drew a circle to keep me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had wit to win. We drew a circle that took them in." That is the spiritual dream of this church. I hope it's the dream of your heart. This is what we believe, however it sounds. This is what we hope, however much it delays. This is what we cherish, even when we cannot find it. It is what we celebrate every time we see it. Whose are yous? I am yours. Amen and amen.